During today's episode, we begin our first episode of Season 3, Suicide and Hope. And today, we talk about the basics of suicide. We ask questions like, what is suicide? How does one begin to process the pain? You will find out all of these answers in today's segment of The Ear.
Thank you, Brandon. This has been an amazing time to talk with you and try to get the word out to people. And again, I would love for them to get their free book from you. And when those are all gone, I would love for them to order a book through barbroberts.com.
Suicide prevention is so important to me. It should be so important to you, and it should be important to God's people. God gave us this precious gift, and we ought to cherish it as long as we can for the time we have on this earth.
Please, if you are hurting in any way, find somebody to listen.
So please stay tuned as we talk about suicide.
Hey everybody, if you are listening to this, you obviously like podcasts, and you probably like music too, right? Well, guess what? On Spotify, you can listen to all of that in one space for free, and you don't even need a premium account. That's awesome. Spotify has a huge catalog of podcasts on every topic, including the one you are listening to right now. You see, on Spotify, you can do several things. You can follow your favorite podcasts so you will never miss an episode. You can even download episodes and listen to them offline, wherever you are. Easily share what you're listening to with your friends and family via Spotify's integration with social media platforms like Instagram, Facebook, and even Snapchat. Just search for The Ear Podcast on the Spotify app or browse podcast in the Your Library tab and follow me so you will never miss another episode of The Ear. Spotify is the world's leading music streaming service, and now it can be your go-to app for podcasting.
The Ear, Evangelical and Reformed Christian Podcast. Welcome to The Ear, the Evangelical and Reformed, a Christian podcast that urges you to think deeper and draws you closer to God through faith. Through powerful sermons, teaching segments, and discussions, The Ear hopes to give you a different perspective on secular topics from a Christian worldview. He who has ears to hear, let him hear. Please welcome your host, Brandon Queen.
Good morning, podcast world, and welcome to yet another episode of The Ear. And today we start our brand new season, Suicide and Hope. And this is a topic that needs to be talked about across all spectrums, in Christian household, families that have cops that are in law enforcement, people that are in the military. This is a topic that needs to be addressed heavily across all spectrums. And I got the privilege of reading this book called With Her Last Breath, A Tale of Suicide and the Hope of Heaven. And I read this on my vacation/General Assembly trip to Denver, Colorado. I read it from cover to cover. I will say the book is awesomely written, has a great author, and I don't want to say cool thing, but the unique thing about this book is it has the actual suicide journal in the book. And I have the privilege of having the author of this book join us for this season. And I would like you guys to welcome Barbara Roberts. Good morning, Miss Barbara.
Good morning, Brandon. Thank you for including me in this podcast.
Oh, I couldn't do it without you. All right. Would you go ahead and tell everybody who you are?
Sure. My name is Barb Roberts. I've been in Pastoral Care Ministry for many years. I am currently, and have been for a lot of years, the Director of Caring Ministry at Cherry Creek Presbyterian Church in Englewood, Colorado. My first book, Helping Those Who Hurt, was a handbook for caring in crisis. And then I've recently had published this second book that Brandon mentioned at the beginning of this podcast.
Awesome. Now, with your Pastoral Care Ministry at Cherry Creek Pres. Did you go to school for counseling or anything?
I got a family counseling degree, yes. Undergrad, I did not get a master's degree, although probably many people think I have one of those. But I've kind of gotten that through just being involved in ministry all these years.
Nice. Now, are you an ordained minister, if you will, within the EPC?
I am not. No, I am not.
Awesome. So this is just a position that your church needed.
That's correct. Yes. We started, like I said, many years ago, and it's just grown over the years. It's the caring ministry umbrella under me is kind of a large umbrella that I get to help people in a lot of different arenas.
Nice. That is awesome. And look, that's something we need. You know, people need to be able to have someone to talk to. And I think that's the biggest problem with suicidal thoughts, you know, depression, is that people feel they have no one to talk to. And look, I have not used your ministry in my personal life, but I am blessed and very excited at the simple fact that we have this available to people, you know, within your congregation that need to talk to somebody, or if they deal with the crisis, they got Barb on the way, you know, which is pretty awesome. So we're going to go ahead and dive into your book, With Her Last Breath. And I got to tell you, did you come up with this title?
Actually, I did, along with my husband and the lady who was my administrative assistant at that point. So it was a kind of a joint coming up with the title and changing and rechanging.
Well, I like it. It's very eye-catching. When I got a copy of the book and I started reading it, I actually started reading it before I got on a plane to head to Denver. And it's funny because I'm a pretty fast reader, and I shouldn't be, but I'm a pretty fast reader. And I'm sitting in the airport, and my flight keeps getting delayed and getting delayed and getting delayed. Now, usually, I mean, this book is not very many pages.
No.
If you break it down between the actual journal and what you actually wrote, it's not that many pages. It's only about 126 pages of content. And I only got to chapter 11 before I boarded the plane. And that's unlike me because I'm usually zoned out, not talking to anybody, and just focusing on reading and listening for flight changes. You know, so I got to chapter 11 and I had to take a break from the book. You know, I had to take a break because it's like, man, this is the first book I've ever read that was so well written that it actually caused me to take a break. And of course, suicide is just one of those horrific things that no one ever wants to deal with from a family member standpoint. And then when I got on the plane, I finished up the last couple of chapters before getting to Denver. And then I decided to read bits and pieces again on the way home from Denver. So this prompted me to develop this series on suicide. So I want you to go ahead and set us up and let us know, who is Kathy?
Well, thank you, Brandon. And I would like to, in just a few short sentences, tell, if I can, who Kathy is. Before that, I have to tell you, I know it's a difficult read. It was a difficult write for me. And I know that my heart is, however God wants to use this book, then that's my heart for this book. Kathy was our niece. She was my husband's sister's daughter. And as a small child, she was confident and fun. And eventually her mom and dad divorced. And we're not sure what all happened in those earlier years, teenage years. Mom had to work. Kathy took care of her younger brother. So she was alone a lot, and early on she joined the Air Force and just became a very different person.
Okay.
Was lonely, and many, many things happened to her. And so maybe I'll stop with that, and then we can jump into some other things.
All right. Perfect. Now, let's start with the basics, Miss Barb. What is suicide?
Suicide is intentionally choosing to end your life. It's, and people do it in many different ways, and it's that choice that somebody makes for whatever reason, a multiple reasons, that I can't do this anymore. I'm not going to do this anymore. So it's that decision that someone makes. Sometimes there's mental and emotional problems involved. Sometimes there are familial problems involved, but basically it's that intention to take one's life.
Gotcha. A lot of people, I'm a cop, so we get all these complaints of people either wanting to commit suicide or have committed suicide. And this is kind of selfish of me because I think life is so precious. I get so frustrated when we get those complaints of someone wanting to commit suicide.
Yeah.
But when I get on scene and, like, for example, if I can tell that this is a legit person that's really hurting and really wants to commit suicide, I have a whole different attitude, a whole different mindset, and I go into what we call elder mode. Where it's like, okay, I need to be here for this person. I need to get this person help. But when I show up on a scene and a person wants to commit suicide because they, quote unquote, isn't getting their way, I don't go into elder mode. I go into, what are you thinking? Why would you say something like that? You are hurting your family, and because you did that, now I'm going to force you to go to the hospital because I heard you say you want to hurt yourself. And people, like, even the people that just they cry suicide just because they don't realize what suicide actually is.
Yeah. It's a very final decision, isn't it?
Right. I mean, one guy, I went to one complaint. I guess he was on drugs and drunk at the same time. I don't think he intended on actually taking his life. I think he did it to get the attention of his girlfriend, and resulted in dying.
Yeah.
And it's like, come on, guys, don't play around with this stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. How tragic.
Yeah, very.
Yeah.
So, can one tell what kind of pain the suicidal person is dealing with? And I ask this question because a lot of people don't understand or don't know or can't tell what kind of pain the person is in.
That's a great question. And I don't have an easy answer, but not necessarily. I mean, I think of a young elder at our church, young, married, 2 young kids, years ago, whose wife had gone through a lot, and he had gone through a lot, and totally unexpected, he went out away from Denver and took his life. And it was just a shock to all of us. And, I've walked alongside of many. I think of a young 14-year-old boy who went on one of our youth retreats on a weekend, came home on a Sunday. Their house was a large home close to our church. The retreat seemed to go well. He went up in his parents' bedroom, found their gun, and shot himself.
Man.
So, I think, I don't necessarily think we know what someone's going through. I think our job that God gives us, any of us who work with people, and that's almost everybody, is to be more concerned, to be there, to listen, to be available no matter what. And rather than trying to figure out all the details, or are they suicidal or are they not, because some will do what the gentleman you said did, and say they're going to end their life, and many will do that, of course, and threaten. But some, no, there's that silent pain that I think God gives us the privilege of walking alongside of others who are hurting.
Yeah, and that's the key. That is the key right there, is to walk with those who, like, I have this statement. I've been using it since a couple podcasts ago, that if a person that is in the faith is suffering of, and this is not just suicide, but it's suffering of any type, or if a believer just can't get the grasp of their faith